is going to be structured there we are. We're gonna so Daniel's gonna do a little bit about Feng Jicai, and then I'm gonna talk to Olivia about her translation of the book, and then we're gonna go into breakout rooms. That'll sort of take about 40 minutes or so. Then we'll go into breakout rooms, and I've got some questions that you can follow or not follow as it goes, and to have a discussion about faces in the crowd, and then we'll come back and have a general conversation for anybody who has anything they'd like to say. So without any further ado, I'll let Daniel introduce Faces in the Crowd, which I don't know if anyone else has this edition. It's absolutely stunning. I'm a big fan of this cover. So Daniel's going to talk a little bit about Feng Jicai and why he's such an important writer, and why why they chose to publish this book in particular.
Well, thank you very much for that, Caitlin. I just prepared a quick slide here, so let me pull that up. So, just to give you a little bit of background on Feng Jicai, he was born in Tianjin in 1942, and he's a contemporary artist, author, and cultural scholar who kind of really came into his own as a pioneer in China's scholar literary movement. They emerged as a kind of reaction to the Cultural Revolution. And he's published almost 100 works inside China and then about 40 internationally. And he's a traditionally trained artist, which you can see in some of his art pieces behind me, and also within Faces in the Crowd itself. He's actually illustrated by himself. And his works have been displayed quite widely in venues as varied as, for example, here in the V&A here in the UK. And he has really quite a major influence in kind of contemporary Chinese today, and he's really known for his work to save cultural folk heritages, as well as playing an honorary role in important organizations such as the Literary Arts and Arts Association and the honorary president of Chinese folk and literature art and other things, for example, with the State Council. He is also a PhD supervisor at the Feng Jicai Institute in the University of Tianjin. Now, I've personally had the pleasure of actually visiting the Feng Jicai Institute itself. It's in this beautiful kind of very ivory kind of building that's inside the campus of University of Tianjin itself. And as you can see inside, it's beautiful. And it's just crammed full of both his own works as well as kind of priceless cultural artifacts from all over China, where he's really tried hard to kind of go into like kind of building sites and stuff that's getting pulled down and kind of really preserve the artifacts that make up Chinese culture. And more recently, he's been working on rebuilding his ancestral family home in his village, which is kind of a little bit north of Ningbo and south of Shanghai. And he's made his old family home into this kind of museum/cultural library, where it features works from all over, kind of literary works from all over China. And if you, just in case you're wondering where that is, this is Shanghai here. And his family village is here north of Ningbo. I'll send out a Google Maps links just after this. And to really give you a taste of it, I thought I'd share a quick video, which they put together recently. Let me. I think you'll agree with me that he's really done a quite authentic and excellent job of restoring that. And to answer your question a little bit, Caitlin, about like why we decided to take on Feng Zhisai, I mean, his stature inside Chinese literature is legendary. We're, in fact, I think Ying will agree with me. We are honored to have the ability to bring his kind of works to a more international audience. And yeah, I think I'll hand that. With that said, I'll hand back to you.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm just going to introduce now Olivia. So Olivia Milburn is a sinologist, author and translator currently lecturing at Seoul University. And she is the translator of Feng Zhisai's Faces in the Crowd. And so thank you so much for joining me, Olivia.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction.
No, not at all. It was very short. You have many more accomplishments to your name. So what I wanted to start with is how did you come to translate this book, and how generally was the process? Was it a particularly easy book or torturous experience? How was it? Did you approach all of it like chronologically?
Right, so translating this book was, I guess, kind of challenging because it is very Tianjin focused, and the language and kind of setting is very focused on the city itself and the unique atmosphere in Tianjin in late 19th, early 20th century, when this is the kind of forefront of westernization and conservative backlash against westernization in China. And a lot of people got killed and a lot of money was made. And that is the experience that leads to the modern day city of Tianjin. So to do that justice, there was a lot of background work to be done to understand the setting and to get the kind of feel right for the historical details in this book. But having said that, you know, I started at the beginning and went through to the end, and yeah, it's a fabulous portrayal of a particular moment in Chinese history, and this one particular location in China. And also you have a kind of real feel for the way that things are changing over time, that and this is all gone. I mean, the fact is that in spite of Feng Zhisai's efforts to preserve historic Beijing, historic Tianjin, the fact is that so much got bulldozed. So much of the life of the old city was absolutely destroyed in modern times that it's kind of unimaginable.
It's interesting to hear you talk about Shenzhen, because for me, whilst reading it, it was very present and also not present at all in the same way. You know, so obviously you have this feeling of all these characters coming together and forming a community, but in some ways also they felt like sketches of people that could be found maybe in a variety of Chinese cities. And was that sort of my ignorance? Was that sort of not seeing that? Or where do you think the core that is Tianjin is in this book?
Yeah, I see where you are coming from with this point. And actually, one of the things that is so very striking about Tianjin in the time span covered in this book is the city just exploded in size. That people came in from all sorts of different parts of China and also from Western countries and so on. And they are bringing their own life experiences to this. And so you can say that these are very archetypal characters in some ways. But what is unique about Tianjin is they're all there, that you have all of these different people from different parts of the country coming in and creating something new through hybridization in this unique set of circumstances. And of course, also what is happening here is this is at a time when during the course of this book, these short stories, there are various natural disasters, there are really, really serious social problems, and there is no safety net. So you have the struggle to survive and these people developing skills to be able to survive in really challenging circumstances.
And I want to go on to that. One of the ways in this short stories, those challenging circumstances are sort of brought through is the humour and the sort of irony and the idea of like what a brilliant trick that was when what was being described as quite a horrible theft. Or
Yes.
And so I wondered if is that something that is Feng Xisai's signature? Is that something that reflects a more line through the tradition of the Chinese short story? What do you think that humor must be?
Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, when I was reading these things for the first time, what they reminded me of most is Damon Runyon's stories about New York in 1920s and 1930s. They have the same kind of underlying horror combined with dealing with that through humor. And I think this is much more the city undergoing explosive growth and all these people flooding in and struggling to make a living in a situation where there is no safety net and there are some real sharks out there. That's something that you see in New York and you see in Tianjin at approximately the same historical era, and therefore these two completely different writers actually approach the topic in a very similar way. You know, that you have to laugh because actually confronting the horror of what is happening to some of these people is just too traumatic, and how are you going to carry on living if you actually don't approach this with humor?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a familiar
yeah, gallows humor.
Yeah, exactly. So there's such a specific style, these short stories, and this is very much sort of like I have no idea. So from like a very like Western readership perspective, they almost don't feel like short stories, they feel very fable-like, or a very like slightly different thing. And it's that sort of a difference between the British and Chinese tradition of the short story, or is it that these are fables in a sense? You know, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I think these are fables. And that's part of the appeal of these writings by Feng. There is this kind of mythical quality, and I think that's also why these particular stories have been so popular around the world. I mean, the French translation has been very successful in particular, because the fable quality is something that kind of transcends national boundaries. It has a way of kind of speaking to people in new ways.
And these aren't fables with morals that are maybe the straightforward ones, like be kind. These are fables with a certain ambiguity to them, sometimes like not seen as good business and things like that. How was that to write and translate?
Oh, that's great fun, right? And Of course, also something like Calvino's collection of Italian fables and traditional short stories, that has very much the same quality. Yeah, some of those stories about, there's a nasty edge. Yes.
Mm, definitely, definitely. And there's also like a sort of a turn from like mundanity to the miraculous very quickly, and nobody, I don't remember, like everybody feels like a mundane-ish character, and then things that are maybe mundane in themselves are made out to be miraculous, or vice versa, miraculous things happen to mundane people. And for you, what was Feng Sisai? Do you think that was integral to how he came to these, or do you think, I guess it's sort of like, what do you read as the like main messages from these stories?
I think actually the main message that I get from these stories is to do with the struggle for survival and the way that, yeah, some very ordinary, boring looking people may actually have amazing qualities that you miss because you are not encountering them in a circumstance which forces them to reveal this. And I suppose that's kind of a metaphor for life, right? That you may encounter somebody and think, my God, this is just, a perfectly ordinary person. And then in other circumstances, you may realize that this is actually somebody with an amazing life story, with amazing qualities to them that you just don't see because it's not something that comes out through your interactions.
Do you have any favorite stories in particular?
I have to say my absolute favorite story is the one about the Yellow Lotus divine matriarch character, one of the last stories in the book. That's the description of the women characters in that is really remarkable and historically accurate, and the discussion of the way that the women warriors behaved during
With all the stamp
Boxer uprising. Yeah, that's real, and that's really kind of sinister. The description of the women warriors going out to stamp the city.
I like that one too. Very much.
That's nice. That's a aspect of this conflict that you don't see talked about.
I also quite enjoyed the art one, where you have the great artist who tries to trick the other great artist. That was a good one. I really like that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are lots of good stories in this. Once you start thinking, well, there's this one that's really good, and then that one has its points as well. And yeah, that one's kind of fun too. Yeah, it's a great collection.
As part of being fable-like stories, the language is very simple. It's really simple. The stories are fairly short. The syntax is very simple.
Yes.
Was that in the original, and how was that to translate? Was that sort of your main focus?
Yes, that was something I was going to always be quite careful to preserve, the kind of simplicity of the style of the original. That's important. That was part of the neat way he puts things. Trying to find ways to convey that in English was important, because I wanted readers to kind of have that feeling from the original.
And the way it like turns on the sentence sometimes even, and the sentence isn't remarkable. Yeah. Was that hard, or was it so part of it that it was just as hard?
It's so much part of it. I mean, the getting the poems right was that was probably the most difficult thing, to have something that kind of rhymed and conveyed the meaning of the original and all that kind of thing. The poems are probably kind of doggerel, but that's okay because they're kind of doggerel in the original as well. But to convey the structure and meaning and rhyme in the poems, that took a little bit of fiddling with to get right. But the basic neat structure, that was relatively easy to convey.
Was there anything, say, another like integral part to it is this relationship between the illustrations and the text itself, and also between actually calligraphy and painting are often within the text themselves very frequently. Yes. Did you see the images the whole time whilst you were writing, or was it sort of, what's your relationship to those illustrations?
Yeah, so I did have the illustrations to look at. That was quite important for some of the stories. Also, I guess the kind of art side was relatively straightforward for me. I mean, this is kind of purely accident. My grandfather was an art dealer. My mother, a painter and artist. So that kind of atmosphere was relatively easy to just get right because this is something I grew up with. It's not difficult for me personally to talk about art and to get the kind of jargon of the art world aspect correct, because I mean that's kind of at home. This is normal everyday life. So that was very straightforward, and I hope I got it correct. But it comes from a background.
And do you think that do you think, obviously it's an easy answer to say the text would be much worse without the illustrations accompanying it, that's obvious, but what is it that you think informs the two? Because often we don't have illustrations in especially books intended for an adult readership. Maybe, I mean, definitely we should do more. But what is it there?
This, I guess, maybe is more of a Chinese thing, that there actually are quite a lot of major modern contemporary Chinese authors who publish with their own illustrations, and that can be such a huge benefit when you are reading, to really be able to visualize. To give you another example, apart from Feng Jicai, somebody like Gao Jianjun, who writes about the far northwest of China, and he has all these books about the lowest plateau out in Jiangxi province and people who live there. And his illustrations for those are kind of crucial, because for people from other parts of the country and for foreigners, it's kind of unimaginable, the landscape, the way that the people look, the life of people in the lowest plateau. So it's not uncommon to have this, and it can be such a huge advantage for visualizing the characters, visualizing the setting, and also, if you are talking about the past, recreating something that's gone, how do you really visually recreate this if not through illustrations. It's really useful. And if you think about it, I mean, in the West, you know, all those classic novels that were illustrated originally, and then they've lost those. I mean, you know, when you look at something like, for English literature, Dickens was illustrated, Anthony Trollope was illustrated. I mean, you know, the original readers of these classic English great novels visualized them with pictures.
Oh, I think I sense a couple of PhDs in those comparisons. Definitely. And I really like the idea that actually you are, if you have never been to Xinjiang, that you are not allowed to imagine it in a way that is maybe familiar to you, but that the illustrations like are a reminder there of what for Feng Xisai this looks like, which I think is quite interesting. It's quite it's quite a cool way of doing it.
Yes, I mean, he's kind of directing you through the illustrations to think about the place and the characters in a particular way, and that's actually really helpful because it reinforces the story.
Completely. And it's, you know, that's a question that people might have different answers to how much they want that, and sometimes be like, no, you know, it's mine, but actually because it's integral and integrated from the beginning, it's his.
It was always intended to be like this, that the stories and the illustrations are created together by the author, and he's intending you to imagine the characters in this particular way, and so it would kind of be wrong to take.
Yeah, in that sort of context, and the like comparing a Chinese based reader and a UK or English language based reader, did you notice different reactions between reactions to the Chinese language text and the English language text at all?
Yeah, I suppose. I guess one of the things is that for a Chinese language audience, you know, these stories are so rooted in Tianjin. They are so part of this place, and then for an English language audience, they're just not going to have that kind of feeling. You know, that intense sense of place that you have from these stories. That is a characteristic of fiction.
And in the context also the conversation about sort of within translated fiction, that we should be more comfortable and more and more we should practice being uncomfortable with the literature that we're reading, and that sort of that it should be basically that we don't always have to adapt things for an audience to be familiar, but we should be okay with that uncomfortability when it is something that's quite different. And you know, there's not, you know, Aesop's fables are fairly well read, so like the fable isn't like unknown within an English language context. But notably also, I don't think that a British writer would have written short stories in this way. And so that sort of question, like, how do you think that interacts with the reception as well?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but on the other hand, I think these stories really do have an appeal and a kind of, they have a way to speak to people that are not necessarily familiar with the cultural background and so on. I suppose it's because it is the characters are so very archetypal that, yes, of course, there are going to be unfamiliar details and whatever, but the basic situations and the characters of these people and the way that they react to what happens to them, that is not alien. I mean, that's kind of just human.
Yes, it's a very much a book about human nature, very much.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, like the story where the man turns up pretending to be bad, who's absolutely furious that the son has run off and married some unsatisfactory woman, and then he goes in with the dad, goes in with the sons and steals absolutely everything, and the whole neighborhood just stands by and watches this because they've bought the story that dad is telling about his unsatisfactory child. Yeah, that would totally work, and you can kind of feel the personalities of everybody involved, and then the wretched poor person who's just had everything stolen comes back, and everybody's criticizing him over the story that has just been spun by this group of criminals. Yeah, it's fabulous, and it's about human nature, and that really works whatever cultural background you come from. I mean, you can kind of imagine this. That's just people.
And as sort of perfectly drawn out by that story, I think between them there are different links between the stories. There's different symbols that reappear, and one of them is cruelty of a kind, maybe I would say, and that I'm not convinced that Feng is saying it's cruelty is integral to human nature, but is integral maybe to this expansionist, this way of living, this city that has sprung up.
Yes, yeah, certainly. I think that is a fair assessment. I mean, that when you have a city with the little old city of Tianjin, that's one thing. And when you have in the 19th century the foreign concessions set up, and then all of this trade is being routed through Tianjin, and explosive growth, and explosive growth that continues right up to the present day. And yeah, that's a whole other ball game. I mean, the society and the problems that these people face with dealing with this complete social upheaval caused by the fact that the city is just growing and growing and growing. Struggling to make, struggling to survive, struggling to make your own way in this really challenging situation.
Since it's been several years now since you did the original translation, has anything sort of changed in the way you feel about the book in the few years since? Would you translate another book by Feng Jicai?
Oh, I have. I have translated more. I'm actually currently in the process of translating another one of his books. So yeah, this is an ongoing thing. Yeah.
And
so
how do they relate to each other? How do the different books feel to you?
Well, the first one of his books that I translated after Faces in the Crowd is A Looking Glass World, and that is kind of related to in time and in theme to the Yellow Lotus matriarch story, and that character cropped again in the A Looking Glass World, and the whole kind of foreign concession and life in the Chinese city being contrasted during the time of Boxer Rebellion in 1900. And gruesome violence that is the backdrop to this. Yeah, that's a very, very fine book. And then what I'm currently working on, as Daniel has just messaged everybody, is this thing called The Artists, which is about a group of painters as the Cultural Revolution draws to an end, and all of a sudden the restrictions on art and what you are allowed to paint and how you are allowed to paint it coming off, and you can kind of do anything. But if you can do anything, what do you do? The kind of paralyzing feeling of having all of these restrictions and mental cramping suddenly taken off, and that kind of, you know, if you can do anything, where do you start? Kind of feeling. That's very, very striking. I mean, and a completely different kind of book.
And how do you feel about Faces in the Crowd now, a few years off of it?
I still love this book. I still think it's a great book. It still really does. I think it does what he wanted to, which is to convey something about what was special about Tianjin before they bulldozed the whole of the old city pretty much and moved everybody out to live in concrete blocks around the edge of the city. And it's just appalling what has happened with destruction and the loss of a great city.
It was, in some ways, would you say then it is a monument or time capsule of a place actually that Feng Qisai never was, you know, that was always a bit of a legend passed on, maybe?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good assessment. You know, it is kind of an elegy, and it is an account of a city that, you know, the most recent story in this book actually takes place just before he's born. So yeah, it's an elegy, and it's kind of memento of what Tianjin was like in the time of his father and grandfather. Yes.
That's a very good one. Thank you so much for all your work in translating it. It was a very beautiful read. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Olivia.
Well, I really enjoyed translating this book. This was fun. I mean, some things I get to translate are not fun, but this was amusing. And engaging, and, you know, having translated one story, it's kind of like, I wonder what's happening next, sort of feeling. So yeah, I really enjoyed doing this.
I can imagine so well. Also, they're so short. You must have felt so productive. You're always getting one done.
Yeah, you know, one after the other. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for talking to me here. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. I thought it was really insightful. Thank you. And now, so we're going to let Olivia escape and go to sleep, because it happens to be very late in the evening in Seoul right now.
Yes, so yeah, it's after 11 in the evening. But just before I go, I should answer the one question that came up about that was sent to me as a direct message about having been to Tianjin. And yes, I have been to Tianjin, and that was really important for being able translate this book, and to get the feeling right for this, because to have some, you know, looking at photographs and so on, that can help. Looking at maps and so on, those are useful, but there is nothing that you cannot replace actually walking around and seeing how the different parts of the city relate to each other and talking to people and just getting a feel for how Tianjin works and the way that the different parts of the city, the architecture and the people living there, how that feels. That's something that you can only really get if you are there in person.
Was that true of the language as well? Was there anything, translators often talk about difficulties being, specific turns of phrase in a location, that then how do you translate that and keep that meaning?
Yes, so yes, there are quite a lot of specific terms from Tianjin, kind of Tianjin slang, also specific terms for things like food, their own special things, and yeah, that's research, and making sure I get those kinds of things right is really important. And yeah, this is where kind of academic research skills are useful, because yeah, there are lots of YouTube videos about how you cook Tianjin food. It's really helpful. Things like getting those sorts of details right. YouTube is wonderful. Looking at the videos and seeing people make the traditional Tianjin food. Once you've seen that, then you can start thinking about how to translate the descriptions of different foodstuffs. Yeah.
Do you remember anyone in particular? I know it was several years ago. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, the one that was really helpful with oh yes, the Baozi, of course, Gonguli, Baozi, but also in the expanded, because Faces in the Crowd originally is 36 stories, and then Jicai wrote another set, so it's now 48, I think. Is that right? Or is it even more? I can't remember. But in the expanded one, 52, okay. I translated it, and I now can't remember how many stories that it got added up to. Okay, 52. But in the expanded thing, there's a story about a family, father and daughter, where they make this kind of noodle pancake and then put all these toppings on top, and getting that right. The description that the YouTube videos were really helpful.
I can imagine. I think it's one of those like unsung things about both translating and writing, that you can't just always sit down. Sometimes you don't know the specifics.
Yeah.
No,
and you just sounded so delicious, right? You make these pancakes and then you chop them up, mung bean pancakes, and you fry them and cook them up, and then you chop them, and then you have this spicy sauce that goes on top, and coriander and stuff. And so I was translating this and just thinking, where is my bowl of this delicious?
Did you try cooking any yourself?
Oh, I wish. I don't have the facilities to cook that kind of thing here.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a future project.
A future project. Alternatively, I can just go to Tianjin and persuade somebody.
Maybe the easier option.
Try the real thing rather than my own, no doubt, inferior version.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Olivia. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening. We really appreciate it. Yeah, round of applause, everyone. Daniel, do you want to do that unmute thing? Well, everyone will be unmuted for just 2 seconds, and round of applause, and then we'll mute again. So thank you so much, Olivia. Right, so now we are going to pop into breakout rooms. So I've put some suggested questions that you might want to talk about in the chat, and I'll also pop them through as like little announcements whilst you're in the breakout rooms if you'd like. So yeah, I hope you have, they'll last about 20 minutes or so. If you have any problems at all, you can click to exit and come back to the main space, and Daniel and I will be here. So if
We have 4 rooms of 5 each, so I'm just going to open them now.
And you should have an invitation that you just click accept on, and I shall see you all in 20 minutes. Bye. And there everyone goes.
We have still a couple of people in the room with us, but that's also okay. I might merge a couple of the rooms because I think, or no, people are joining. Room 4. I might move room 4 and room 3 together because it would seem that a couple of people didn't join. So move that to room 3. Room 3. There it is. So people can have like a good discussion and stuff like that. Ooh,
Linda's not going to join one, so if you want.
Oh dear. Okay, sure, no worries. There's another question here by Qipan. Thank you so much for sharing us experience of reading the translation of the book of Professor Milburn. I was wondering how the illustrations by Feng have influenced your decision-making process when translating this book. Could you please share something interesting? Please share something interesting about this with us.
Yeah.
Is he still in the room with us?
No, he's fans.
Oh dear.
Room 3, but I maybe we can just do a text answer so Olivia can get off.
Yeah,
sure.
You kind of addressed that a little bit anyways, I think.
But pause the recording for now and then give me a second.
My brother.
Sorry, I'm just really like. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Very much a PC gamer. Not Switch or anything, but I've never stuck to the PC. I've always found it not like, I don't want to be looking at my computer, so it's exciting.
I'm jealous.
Do you not have one, Daniel? I'd expect you to.
I came from a no game household.
Hey, that's not true. That's not true.
Hello everyone, I hope you had a lovely time in the groups. So as we were just talking about, I've just recently purchased a Nintendo Switch, so Daniel and I were comparing notes. I just want to, so what we'll do is it's open for anyone to talk at any time that you'd like. If you'd like me to come to you specifically, pop your name in the chat, or else we could like call around and give people opportunities to speak. So anybody like to start us off? And you can also like report back on anything that was interesting that was said in your breakout room, not necessarily by you as well. I think the first question I had is, did people like the book? How did you find it? And I'm going to call on any volunteers? On Debbie. Debbie, please.
All right. There's something about my face, isn't it? Yes, I think we agreed that we all liked it, yes. Yeah, it was easy to read because you could just, you could be reading something else at the same time, but just like pick up a couple of stories every evening or something like that, and it was amusing, often very amusing to read, and yes, it's just very accessible. So, and then a lot of it was very amusing, and there was always something new. You did think, oh, what's the next one going to be about, And yeah, so I think it was a book that was quite difficult not to like, really, you know. It was yeah. So yes, we all liked it.
I very much agree, very much agree. What about your group? Claudia, do you want to go?
Well, in my group, we also agreed that we liked the book, even though I, for myself, I only knew about the book that was being discussed a few days ago, so I haven't read the whole book, just a few stories. Yeah.
And did anything interesting come up? What did you think about? Do you think these are fables? And well, I'm trying to remember. Also, do you think how realistic? I think those are a couple of other questions.
Actually, I found them quite realistic. And since I have lived in China for a few years, I think I could just picture some of the people, and as was said before, I could picture them in any other city in China as well. But maybe since I haven't read the whole book, there's probably also very specific to Tianjin descriptions, but I could picture lots of people in these stories at any other place in China as well. And I didn't think of them as fables, but I actually thought they were quite realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite a. I like that. I like that a lot actually, because you're right that they are. They're very recognizable characters. They're very recognizable. How about Jing? How about you? Would you like to say anything?
Hello. Me too. I really liked the book, and I read it in primary school and middle school. I only read the original version of the book, and I think this book is the reason I go to Tianjin for university. And I'm now in Tianjin here, and I really like people here and the atmosphere and the character of this city. And people here are humorous. And in this book, they have many talent and they make a living on it. And I think people here, they have like crosstalk. They are very humorous, and yeah, people are nice here. And so I think book is very nice too. And also, I really like the title of the book, "Faces in the Crowds," and because the straight translation of the book is ordinary people in extraordinary people in an ordinary world, and faces in the crowd, it makes it very clever, and I really like the translation, the title of the book. And thank you.
We really have Olivia to thank for that, really, Ying, don't we?
Oh, Ying, sorry,
yeah, you're muted.
Olivia, when we try to choose the title, and it's taking us a long time to settle with faces in the crowd. Yes.
Well, no, actually, technically, that's not true. We talked about it for ages. We came up with all sorts of like wild ideas. I think at one point it was like extraordinary people of Tianjin or something like that. But then we had a meeting with Olivia, and she's just like, faces in the crowd, and the light bulb went off, and then everyone's like, yeah. I think that it was a delight to watch an old master at work, definitely.
That shows how important a good translator contribution towards the success of the book.
And Jing, what do you study? Just out of interest.
Sorry?
No, sorry, not Ying.
Sorry.
I study finance in Nankai University. Not literature. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. We'll forgive you. That sounds very useful. I hope you enjoy it. And that's amazing to hear that the books had like that much of an impact. It's always so heartwarming. Can I get anybody else? I definitely will go to Anna and Max next. But if anybody who doesn't have their camera on wants to speak, you're very, very welcome to, or just audio if you'd like to at all. Pop your name in the chat if you'd like me to come to you. But who should I call on first? Anna or Max? Who do you want to say anything?
I'll go. I just wanted to mention a few more things that me and Claudia talked about, because we had a very interesting discussion. One of the things that we noticed was interesting about the book was how so many of the endings of the stories seemed very abrupt. Like they would end on a note that you expect there to be more of a resolution, or it like ends right at the moment of climax where you expect there to like be an aftermath that you never find out about. You're sort of left wondering. I guess we found that interesting, and both like interesting that you can imagine lots of different possibilities of what could happen, and frustrating in a sense, and that you're like cut off at a moment where you think there should be more. Yeah.
They're
and
so
then one of
ambiguous, aren't they? They're wild.
yeah, absolutely. Ambiguous is definitely the word. Oh yeah, and another thing that was very interesting was that how we talked about how Claudia was saying that before she knew that the author and the illustrator were the same, she was like amazed at how like in harmony both the illustrations and the text were. That it's like really goes to show like how good the pictures are and how much they are integral and fit with the book, because they really do have this harmony between them, and that both have this kind of quality, the writing and the art of being able to convey these characters in just a few strokes, which is really impressive. Like even the text has this kind of like, I guess, ink brush drawing like style in a sense. Yeah, so that's some of the things we talked about.
They sound lovely. What about Max?
Yeah, so one of the things we were talking about in our group was how, in terms of like the aspect of how realistic it is, and also how it relates to people's own individual experiences in their own life, is how like in a lot of the stories, although some of the stories might be quite sort of outlandish nature to them, there's also there are bits of them that are very much sort of relatable to general human nature. So like for the specific story, I thought the one of the gangster who fakes his own death and witnesses his own funeral basically by hiding in a coffin was really interesting, because it's an absurd situation, but the whole aspect of the people attending his funeral and sort of saying these things about him behind his back, and sort of almost like showing very sort of interesting like aspects of life, and that sort of dynamic between human relationships, where you know one impression is someone and another impression. And also I thought it was interesting because it was sort of the inverse of the classic thing that would happen in a somber situation, like a few people will, you know, say very nice things about the person who's died, and almost sort of maybe sugarcoat aspects of their life, and instead it's the complete, and they're sort of being horrible about him. So I think, and obviously this goes for all the short stories in general, how they sort of take a ridiculous situation, but includes very relatable aspects within them. So yeah, that was something I really about the short stories.
I think there was something about that one that stood out to me too. It's almost like the more grotesque ones, the ones that are slightly more venture into you know, the underworld. I don't know, not the underworld, like it's the ones like Drinking Granny as well, Boozing Grandma as well. It's like these ones that yeah, again
it goes back to that point that Olivia made about how sort of some of the subject matter can be quite dark, really, like in terms of the demise of, although we never really know exactly what happened to Boozing Granny. It's, you know, it's implied that she had quite a nasty demise, but it's presented in a way where it becomes almost humorous. It's like, oh, he just put the real drink in this time, and wasn't that sort of a trick from the barman almost? And that's very, very interesting, the whole sort of style of these short stories, and the way in which they're sort of framed in a sort of almost a lot, no matter what the actual subject, regardless of what the subject matter actually is. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And as the sort of all of us are quite, well, I'm a recent reader of these stories, and Jing, as from sort of like your childhood to now, like which stories have stuck with you? What are your favorites? Given that there's a bit of a longer time.
Actually, I like all of them almost, and because some of the story are in our textbooks in our Chinese book when we are in middle school and in primary school, so I maybe remember them more deeply. Yeah, and about that drinking granny, I really didn't understand what's the meaning of the whole text. Actually, I think she's some of a legend after she died, and it's like a myth, and people just talk it and pass through the generation. And I think it's a real story rather than a fake one. I think they are all real and all the people are real. I think Tianjin is a place where all these real people make a living, and because they are here, they have to make a living actually, doing business or what else, something else. Yeah.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end on. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you got something or learned something new from it. So yeah, I hope to see you all. So before I had nearly caught myself there. February, of course. So February, we're doing a little bit different. It's not a sort of like straight up book club. It's going to be a new author showcase where we're going to look at some of the books that are sort of in Sinoist's pipeline. They're 4 new authors. And so we're going to have little video clips from each author. So no prep, no reading that you have to do before this one. You can just come along and enjoy it. Yeah, it'll be a little look at what's coming up next and what Ying and Daniel are working on. So I think Daniel's going to introduce those books a little bit.
Certainly. Thank you very much for that, Caitlin. I mean, we're very much we'll be very much returning to the book club format after February. So you'll have, if you really like the book club format, you also have it to enjoy in March. But this is really what we're calling our spring showcase, which we currently are working on a sort of hybrid event together with possibly Queen Mary in East London University. And it's going to be hosted on the 24th. Don't worry, if you're not able to make it to Queen Mary, don't worry. We will have AV equipment ready to bring in a digital audience as well. And it's very much about the kind of books that are currently inside of our pipelines, right? So to give you a bit of introduction of what's currently here. So for example, this is a book called Chen Yan, and it's by an author called Chen Yan. It's called Zhongtai. Currently the working title English name is Set Dressing, and it's about this kind of art company that does the background set dressing to theater in Xi'an, and all the hijinks that ensues. We also have a book called 16书生接樱桃 by Li Er. The English translation is going to be A Cherry from a Pomegranate Tree. And it is going to be about kind of China's struggle with the one-child policy, specifically told from the perspective of an official whose job it is to enforce the policy. Next we have 平原客 by Li Peifu, and it's the English translation is A Guess of the Plains, and it is about kind of the rise and fall of a grain scientist who kind of goes to study in America, comes back to China, like achieves great success, but also ultimately his success ultimately dooms him as well. And we're very excited about that. And then finally we have author called Xu Huaizhong, and it's the book is called 千峰记. The current working title is called The Leading Wave, and it is Ying, correct me if I'm wrong, Second World War, correct? Second World War, or is it the Civil War? Sorry, Ying, you're muted.
Yes, absolutely. It is talking about 大别山, during the Japanese War.
So it'll be the Second World War, kind of the Asian theater of the Second World War, and it's very much written. It's a 矛盾文学, so this is essentially the Chinese equivalent of the Booker. It won that, and the Malden Literary Prize, and it's about kind of set during the Second World War. I believe a guerrilla troop, correct?
No, it's not guerrilla troop. It is the one university student who joined the military, and then she fell in love with a senior sort of like officer in the military, and then the whole men trip was withdrawn, because there are guerrilla sort of like war between the Japanese and the Chinese. And then, these women, this group of women, I think it's 8 of them, probably 8 of them, been captured by the Japanese. And then they during the war they escaped, not escaped, they released, towards the end of the war they released them, and then everybody thinking they been raped, but in fact she didn't been raped, at all. But because of thinking of rape, their boyfriend, their husband, basically dumped them very sadly. And then she was broken. Both her leg was broken, and by the Japanese in the prison. And so her boyfriend left her a horse with her and her one security sort of like a guard, to help her. And when the men trip was in the battle, she was escaped to this cave, mountain cave. And then when he find her, she basically died in this log tree, inside the tree, because the horse literally really protected her all the way. It's a very, very, very sad story, but
it really brings to light like kind of a side of the war that really doesn't get covered in kind of, at least in the UK. Yeah.
I think they also try to say sometimes horses are better than human, probably. The horse never sort of gave her up, until she was died. The horse still tried to cover her, drag her out of the cave and put her in by the tree, sort of like there. And it's really, and then the horse died as well, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Spoilers, Ying, spoilers.
Sorry.
And Linda's saying, can you email those books out, a list of those books? They all, I believe they're all going to be in the subscription, but they're not coming out. Right.
Yeah, they're not coming out. I think most of them are on the subscription, and they're coming out as in a kind of bi-monthly basis. Currently, we have the next book is going to be The Sons of Red Lake, and then the one after that is going to be the A Looking Glass World, and then I believe immediately after that is Guest of the Plains, I believe.
And yes, we will definitely. I'll make a list of those on the Eventbrite for you as well, Linda, so that you can see a list of those as well. We'll email that out. So yeah, so thank you all so much. I think that is all from me. Anything to add, Danya?
I think that was a brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for making a showing at 1 p.m. in the afternoon here in the UK, and Xinting, especially that it's quite late over there, right? So yeah, but best on a Friday night. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend. And
Thank you.
we shall see you all. Thank you, Linda. We shall see you all in February on the 24th.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Jing.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Cool.